What is up, people? Welcome to today's video, and today's video is going to be slightly different. This is much more of a relaxed video today, and we're going to get through a lot of the details on the lessons I've learned from recording 100 podcasts. Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy road over the last year and a half, and I want to get into some things that I've learned, some lessons. So on this video, you should learn a lot about some things you can take away from this after 100 podcasts recorded on kickoff sessions. This video is sponsored by Suns. Suns are a men's healthcare brand that offer clinically proven licensed hair loss treatment for less than the cost of a coffee every day. Follow the link in the description and use the code KICKOFFSessions40 to avail of 40% off your first order. Alright people, welcome to today's video, and on today's video I'm going to get into all details on the lessons I've learned. It's been a wild year and a half. Many ups, many downs, more probably downs than ups, but overall we're trending upwards. And there's multiple things that I've learned during this period. This is going to be a chill video. Sit down, relax, grab a cup of coffee and just chill out and listen to it, right? So I started this podcast like a year and a half ago. Not much idea what I was going to do. I think a lot of people don't have an idea what they're going to do when they first start anything in general. But you do want to start something that's like sociable. I wanted to try something that was interactive with people, and I wanted to just meet sick individuals across my career, across multiple different niches, and just learn things. I think that was the main reason why I started it, and one of the main things that I've learned from here is everything that I've got from other people, their perspectives, their insights. But during this, I started a weekly show, and really I understood the value of actually being patient. People talk a lot about hockey stick growth, so it's a small kind of beginning at first with many ups and downs, and then it takes off from there. I can honestly say that after like a year and a half, it's not like I'm after taking off and I'm like massive. I'm definitely not big, that's for sure. I'm definitely small as well in physical stature. But that process of hockey stick growth, of just being very patient, is very challenging to do. No matter if it's a startup, if it's an online business, no matter what you want to do, it's challenging at first. But sticking in there and being patient is what I've learned just so much. And it's not about just like, be patient for like, downloads and followers and whatnot. It's more so just being patient with yourself, because there's so much things you're going to need to be able to get good at, and this is something else that I've also learned, is that podcasting isn't just clicking record and moving on. It's editing, it's production, it's design, it's how you design your episodes, it's how you construct your episodes, how you construct your messages and stories. And in doing that as well, there's also a lot of copywriting, there's marketing involved, there's growing Instagram pages. I've had 2 Instagram pages deleted, would you believe? Not for doing some things on OnlyFans or doing some stupid shit. I also don't do OnlyFans, that was a terrible joke. But there's things that you'll never anticipate until you're in the weeds. It's the same with any sort of business, I presume. You think that it's just like one thing, and then you get in there and it's very difficult. But being patient is, hugely valuable. And that's why you need to have a bit of a purpose with why you're doing this. I wanted to connect with other like-minded individuals, but I also wanted to provide advice for young people. So my podcast has always been around, hopefully expert quote unquote, advice for young people. And in doing so as well, I wanted to be like responsible for doing that. I wanted to be the podcast guy. I wanted to be the person that people would go to learn shit from guests, from even me maybe someday, that they would learn a lot from. And I think having that extrapolated view over the course of a year and a half, and many more years, hopefully because creating content online, that's what you need to do. You need to be patient with that. What you also need to be is really consistent, okay? You see a lot about like consistency, whatever, online, and it's kind of like a kind of shit motivation quote, whatever. It'll be like, be super consistent. But you need to be consistent from the perspective of people need to be familiar with the fact that you're going to show up and you're going to be the guy every Wednesday, from my case, that produces good content, that produces good things, that takes the time to produce things that people will want to consume and enjoy and listen to and learn from. And being consistent means that you progressively get that small bit incremental better every time. Each time you record a session, each time you record a post, or should I say publish a post, or create a reel or whatever, you're getting slowly incrementally better. And it's funny, we could listen to some of my earlier podcasts, and I've actually listened to this before. I should even throw it on now, but they're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. My side of it, my guests, fantastic, of course. But my insights were, of course, like I was very nervous and whatnot. And over time, you get very consistent, and with that, you get incrementally better. The it's just a compound effect. You know, as time goes on, you can only get better at whatever you do, and that's why I think what I've learned as well is the fact that I'm not good at, you know, particularly anything in the beginning, which is okay because over time, if you're going to be committed to it, you're going to get better and you're going to learn. So just being kind of consistent with that and sticking to it, especially in the moments where it's shit. And this isn't like a motivational fucking video now, but you know, there's certain times where things are more difficult. You know, I'm moving. I just moved again, and it is a bit challenging to get up and record podcasts and just do shit in general. But you just have to be able to kind of plan around that and that kind of structured approach. And then once you get that benefit, people will realize that you're that kind of guy, and your content will also get better with that as well. So there's always that kind of like ongoing thing about just being persistent, being patient, and also being consistent overall. Some other things that I think I've learned as well from the very beginning is the fact that really around the kind of motivation element of it is that I think when people start anything, there's always that high level of a motivation, low level of maybe like understanding of what they're doing. And motivation is just cheap. Like it's just cheap, you know, it doesn't really like play like the long game, you know. But what's difficult is getting that rhythm set up. So I think after, what is it, 13 episodes or 20 episodes, people get that pod fail whereby they just begin to fade off, or pod fade, whatever it's called, and then they just kind of give up at the end of it. That is very natural, fair enough, maybe it might not be for you. But after the motivation kind of like leaves, that's when you get down into the nitty gritty of progress, actually doing better, getting there, and really like actually progressing, you know, like making the changes. That's the same with anything, man. You know, so like my other background or my other interest is like training in gyms, bodybuilding. Like just when, you know, I start a diet or I start another phase of it, high motivation, low input. That's not great overall. But when you stick with it, improve with it, that's when you get the real output. And I feel personally as well, that's when you're going to grow as much as possible. So if you are doing something that's not even podcast related, just anything in general, like when the motivation kind of fades off, recognize it and be like, this is it. Like this is when I'm going to make the kind of growth. Because other than that, you're just kind of going in and out, and you're kind of picking up new things, and you don't want to be that guy that just does some shit in the short term and then just move on. You want to be someone that people, you know, think that you're going to be associated with it, and you actually want to stick with it. And that was one of the, you know, really, like, I've got some nice comments about getting to 100 episode, and one guy, the nicest comment I got was someone saying that it's refreshing to see someone stick with something and stick through it. So even though it hasn't been, you know, pretty at times, sticking with it, getting that rhythm is so important. All right, the next point that I want to get into, which is very valuable, is how you don't need to have loads of cash to start anything, right? This is what I've learned, is that you can get off the ground, and before you get into the comment section and say that like you can't start like a tech startup without it, fair enough, you might not be able to start everything, but you can definitely do some basic levels without a lot of investment, putting a lot of money in. And podcasting is a great example. I started off with $60. I had an idea, I had a vision, I just went for it. Okay, you can apply that principle to literally anything. Literally anything. You can get online, get a free software, free approach, you know, Google Doc, or even a free like template, or like even design tools, or whatever you want to do, and just start doing things, just like doing and things, and putting action together and putting pieces together. That is what creates a good ideas, a good fundamentals, without getting too caught up on, oh, I need this cash, I need this, I need that. Since then, I know I've the flashy microphone, good camera, forget about all that shit, right? Whenever I'm speaking to people about this, you don't need a lot of cash to get going. You just need to be literally inspired to do something that's different, something that's creative, why you want to do it. And this is why I always go back to the kind of Simon Sinek of, you know, Find Your Why, or whatever that fucking book is called, is the fact that once you know why you're doing it and you're taking those kind of provincial steps, you don't need much money to get going at first. You can start testing your hypothesis. You can start testing as, is this podcasting for me? Is this something I want to do long term? Just by testing out the idea. And I recorded 3 or 5 episodes in the beginning, and I just wanted to see, was it something that I could potentially do longer term? And I remember like thinking the episodes are pretty poor, but I knew to kind of get better. So I didn't want to go like all in like this, you know. And you know, I do want to up level my game, like even from episode 100 to 200 now. Now that I'm based in Singapore, I want to start recording in some cool studios. Even if I do it here at home as well, I want to start doing things that are a bit more like higher production, just because I think that's where I naturally want to go to. But you do not need any investment really to get going. Just, less than $100. Get out there, test your voice, test your hypothesis, test, do you like this? Just go for it. Go for it. And then if you don't like it, then scrap it and do something else. And I guarantee you're going to be, a lot better afterwards. And that's something as well that really stood out to me, is the fact that, for me, I'm dyslexic. I don't write that well. I don't necessarily like comprehend things that are, very clearly sometimes when they're written down, whatever. However, speaking is something that's quite one of my strengths. I wouldn't say that I'm fantastic at it, but I would say that I'm naturally good at it. You'd find me in bars and clubs just chatting the ear off someone in general. So I think playing to your strengths is something that people don't necessarily do as much, right? If you are someone who's a good writer, if you're someone who's a good listener, even there's a occupation there, or someone who's good at logical thinkers, analytical thinkers, just leaning into that strength is much better than putting, a square peg through a circular hole. You don't need to force something through. If I wanted to become like a blogger, which is originally what I wanted to do, I wanted to do something that was social, and I was thinking of like maybe a blog or something like that. It's just not really, suited towards my style. There's other things I could be doing. Recording stuff on this microphone, chatting to people on the internet is much more better. I'm a social guy. I like getting out there. I like speaking to people. It's much more suited. Play to your strengths. Double down on that. Go hard as that. And I guarantee you're going to get paid for it. That's the thing. You can get paid for doing pretty much anything on the internet. But I think if you can lean into your strengths, the perfect example is that the kind of online PT guy, if someone is into bodybuilding or training or whatever, it's very easy to turn on the monetization dial on that because they already have vested interest in it. Podcasting is a bit more obscure. You got to learn how to speak to a camera, whatever. But you can definitely get to it though. It kind of seems weird looking at a camera and just talking kind of shit, but you kind of get there after a while. And that's what I want to encourage people, is that look at your strengths, because what's not necessarily easier, but what comes more naturally to me may be completely alien to someone else. But what is natural to them might be something that I could never ever do in my life, And you get more opportunities the more you kind of do something. And I've kind of been looking out some other different things, and there's just some things that I wouldn't be as interested in because I'm not naturally kind of good at it, And again, you can work on it, you can get better at it, but just lean into your strengths, just double down on it. And yeah, it's sick. You don't need to be pushing yourself too hard to learn something because someone else is doing it, And that's a big thing here as well, is that when I started my podcast, when I was going through the trenches, I would nearly say that I don't have any competition. I don't compete with anyone personally. There's other people who are doing some great stuff, and I've made a lot of good friends from this game as well, but I don't compete with it. I think that's the basis of this too, is just doing things. Hopefully this chair doesn't creak too much, but it's about just doing things that you enjoy and doing things that you want to pursue and you want to try and you think is valuable to you. If you're looking around always for other people for inspiration to help you and get things done, well, it's not going to work out long term, And this is why I think if you're working in this kind of online business, creative space where you're trying to break out there and kind of do something that's worthy to someone else, you need to just understand why you're doing it and then just follow that kind of pursuit. Blocking out the noise and blocking out other obstructions and other people's opinions is valuable for the stuff. It's great to get feedback, of course. I lean into my friends, I lean into my girlfriend quite a lot, and I get a lot of feedback from her, I get a lot of feedback from other people, and that's okay. But it's good to understand why it is you're doing anything, and then just kind of double down and pursue it. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when you're in the weeds, you're in the weeds. It doesn't matter what you're doing, building an online business, working in your day job, doing whatever. Okay, let me take a little break. But when you're in the weeds, okay, of anything, it's difficult. It's challenging as fuck. So that's when it goes back to understanding okay, you're doing this because you want to do it. Not because you want someone else to do it. Not because you want someone on Instagram to see that you're doing it. That's the wrong reason to do anything. It's just a broken fallacy. It's a broken property. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And over the long term, you're just going to end up being kind of probably a little bit depressed, probably a little bit unhappy with what you're doing. And the whole idea why you do this or do anything online is because you want to kind of better yourself and then kind of enjoy the process, and you want to do because you enjoy it, right? And of course it gets difficult, it gets tough, but you're doing it for that reason. You're not doing it for the wrong reasons, okay? And that's why you kind of weed out some of the people who aren't interested in recording podcasts pretty early on, because you can kind of see it. People will start doing I don't know, maybe a self-development or a mental health podcast, and they're am I really that interested in it? Really? And then after 10 episodes, they're oh, this wasn't for me, I'm going to do something else. And it's fine giving up things, but understanding why you're doing it is super important. All right, so something else that I wrote down here as well is around just kind of being yourself. So this is obviously like super cliche with like online business and shit. It's like, oh my God, be yourself. But I would say that podcasting is especially hard from the very beginning to be yourself, because you're often speaking to people that you don't know. And when you're speaking to someone at first, you kind of want to obviously give a good impression to them, and you want to be kind of on your best behavior to a kind of certain degree. So when you sit down to click record, you kind of have double pressure. You kind of want to speak to this person professionally or on a kind of like a formal, informal basis. But then you also want to show up and kind of look the part as well. This is something I struggled with at first, because from the very beginning I wanted to record with sick people, smart people, creative people, startup founders, all that kind of good stuff. And it was something that I kind of struggled with, I would say. But as time went on, I think just the law of numbers kind of kicked in, the law of consistency, and it became more natural. It became to have these kind of genuine conversations with people, and they weren't just like an interview, like, what do you do? Like, what is your background? Like, we don't need to know those things. And I was able to have like an opinion. And I'm trying to give like a good example here is like, if we're talking about even like kind of like investing or something like this, if someone gave like their own opinion, there's 101 different ways obviously to invest. If someone gave their own opinion, I would have my own opinion about that. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe we could look at it this way, or there's some other considerations to have. And then the guest then would become even more interested because they're kind of getting more involved. And you're just getting that kind of more genuine feel about it. And it's funny because when you look at the data, the episodes where you have a better connection with people, that you feel more natural with people, are generally the ones that actually perform the best, because people kind of see you for who you are versus who you kind of pretending to be. And that's tough. And it's not like you're trying to pretend to be someone else. It's just that like naturally you're just not having that perfect click. You're not going to click all the time. And it becomes difficult. Even speaking to a microphone is difficult. So it just takes practice, takes time. And you kind of work there. Also with this as well is about kind of genuine conversations. So as I mentioned, there's nothing kind of worse than just hearing like an interview. It's like CNBC. It's like, so where do you think the market is going? So like, what do you think you should do next? You want to get to a stage whereby you both feel like on par. And I think this is kind of more difficult when you're recording remote. So like I'd obviously record through StreamYard. I used to use Zoom, whatever. And there's a bit of like a sound lag. There's a bit of a kind of disconnect. So it's kind of hard to get like that genuine conversation, like that flowing like in-person feel. But you do get there kind of like eventually. So I think it's just about fostering those conversations, fostering those like relationships really, so that they become more natural. And I think people feel like then, I think I heard like a Joe Rogan post about this before about how he said that when he records podcasts, it's as if no one else is in the room. It's as if there's no cameras in the room. And that spoke a lot to me, because it was kind of like he's just having a conversation with a friend. It's a 4-hour conversation, but he's having a conversation with a friend, and everything else is just kind of happening in between, So there is that element of just kind of being yourself in that in those instances, and making sure that they're actual genuine conversations. Takes a bit of time, but I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've definitely learned. Some other stuff as well that, I'm just kind of thinking as I'm speaking is about, not putting yourself down for people you can interview with. So you can run different types of podcasts, whatever. The most common is probably a guest podcast. And with that as well, there's always this kind of like limiting belief of like where you can go to and what you can do and who you can speak to. And like, by no means my podcast is like big, but what I would say is that I've kind of learned to be a little bit more kind of fearless in terms of, I don't really care if people like open my message and don't respond. Like, it's cool. I'm asking them to do something, they don't respond, fair enough, whatever. In doing that, I think I've just built up a bit more kind of thicker skin. And I remember from the very beginning, I just wrote out a list of people who I want to interview and I want to speak to, pretty much. And when I started messaging them, I felt at first that I was like, oh no, these people don't want to get back to me. Maybe I don't want to do this longer term or whatever. But as time goes on, you realize that who you don't catch in the short term, you can catch in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. When you're playing the long term, it's completely fine. It's completely chill. So don't limit yourself on that. Also think North Star. Think no constraints. Think as if everything worked out, what's going to happen from here? That's always the way to look at things, is that you look at things, no constraints, just fully what could possibly happen. And then you just start sketching out some of the best guests ever. I recently had Joe Delaney on my podcast. I had a few other guys as well, like Josh Bridgman, in the last couple of weeks that I would have looked up to quite a lot when I was younger. I think they're sick guys doing sick things. And now they just kind of appear on podcasts. It's not like I'm best friends with them. I'm not going to pretend like I'm friends with them full time. But it's just nice to be able to interview these people and not think, Joe doesn't want to interview, Joe doesn't want to speak to me and all things like this, Just thinking from a kind of a more of a lack of limiting belief has benefited me probably the most, I would say. And one of the other things that's benefited me most is just thinking long term. I like to think long term with whatever I do. And especially to kind of root to making this something that's sustainable and maybe something that's kind of a bit more longer term, is not getting caught up with short term goals that, I need to have this amount of subscribers or this amount of followers, this amount of downloads. Just thinking longer term, what it is you want to achieve longer term. I want to just create a platform for people to come and learn about their career, their lifestyle, their personal finance, pretty much everything. It's pretty simple. And by thinking longer term means I can just work on it, put the work in the short term, and slowly I work towards that long term vision. Extrapolating, whatever. And I know people have different constraints around they need money right now and stuff like this. And that's why it's good to do this as a side project at first before you take it on and become a fuller, kind of more business kind of focus, and then you can just kind of get less stressed in the short term, I would think, Other things I want to just focus on as well is around the profitability scenario. So it took me probably around 13 months to turn profitable. Probably. I put a lot of cash up front. I got a lot of good things as time went on, a lot of things I needed. I got a designer early on. All my designs are always done professionally. And that was fine because at the time, or right now, I was also working a full-time job. So I was using that money to, essentially buy in or invest into my podcast. And with that then, as over time it kind of progressed. Now, not every month is completely 100% profitable, but what I'm trying to say is that it's moving towards that kind of avenue. And people get very caught up and they're like, okay, so how do I turn it profitable right now? What can I do? There's other things you can do outside of just turning on ads for fucking Manscaped for your podcast. You can do ads, you can do affiliate marketing, you can do sponsorship posts, you can do a few other things, but you can also offer your services. So, I do a lot of consulting for brands and podcasts. I do coaching for young professionals or professionals in general in their career. And those things are under the umbrella of your podcast kind of business. So you don't think short term, you don't think in terms of just one revenue stream. You kind of open it up. And I'm thinking of recording a podcast on this. So if anyone is interested in revenue streams for online business around this, please let me know down below. But you just don't limit yourself to it just needs to be the podcast and I just want to be like Joe Rogan that I just get a sponsorship deal. It's just the wrong way to think about it. Open your mind to multiple different possibilities, should I say, and you'll get that reward when it comes back around. So these are some of the lessons I've learned. I probably have a few more other ones, but I kind of want to wrap it up here. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this, please drop a like down below. Please subscribe as well. Super helpful. Or also go check out my podcast. Check out the 100th episode with Joe Delaney. Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment and even share it towards Instagram or whatever. So I'll leave it right here. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next 100 podcasts.